Welcome to Bridging Chicago, a podcast that aims to connect our listeners to Chicago's business, community, cultural, and charity leaders.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. I want to thank you for joining us so far on Season 6. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Nathan. I'm your host for today's episode, and I'm joined by Dr. Gordon Siegel, who is the CEO of SpaceShifts, LLC, doing something really interesting here in the city. And Gordy, we're going to talk about all that, but we are Bridging Chicago, and we like to start with people's Chicago stories. So why don't you tell us about what brought you here to Chicago, if you grew up here, or your Chicago story?
I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was an absolutely wonderful place to grow up.
Yeah.
And I came here for school, and I've been here ever since.
You came here for
medical school.
Medical school, okay.
Right. Which always leads into real estate, of course.
Obviously. I mean, I can't tell you how many doctors I've interviewed that are now like doing real estate stuff because,
right.
I mean, it is really cool though, because when I talk to a lot of people who have this kind of story, we had a woman on who was the CEO of a company and now is running an art studio. And she said, this is my second act, essentially. This is the next chapter, but it's a big chapter. So it almost is like a second act or a second life. Is that the way you feel?
I think it has that potential.
Yeah.
I am one of those very fortunate individuals in that I absolutely love my day job.
Yeah.
Which is practicing medicine.
So you're still doing that?
Oh my goodness gracious, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and so sort of doing these two things, I think one is very much service-oriented, you're helping people in medicine.
Right.
Which, how long have you been doing that?
Gosh, 30 years, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has to feel pretty rewarding, being able to do something that is helping people in a very direct way. I mean,
absolutely.
I think we all kind of do in some way, but
absolutely.
For especially given this time that we've come out of, where we're still being careful, but for the most part, COVID is at bay now, and so we can kind of move on and I guess all have our second act. But in that time that we just went through, for you as a medical professional, how do you look back on that and sort of evaluate that, and what do you take away from, especially that year and a half, 2-year period where it was a part of everyday life?
Well, I think the statement that we open with is that it's changed the world.
Yeah.
In so many ways, including our topic of discussion today, which is, am I going to work in the office? Am I going to work from home? And now I've got this big office and I have 17 rooms in my office and I only have 7 people coming in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and from that perspective, I mean, I look at that. But in terms of medically, it's interesting. During active COVID, if you will, we all, at least in ENT, or nose and throat, which I do, slowed down because people were not out spreading germs to each other. So we saw a lot less sinus disease, a lot less other things. And it also, I thought, decreased the quality of medicine. We were doing telemedicine for a short time, and I think telemedicine is good in some aspects, and you can save, visit, but for what I do, a lot of what I do is looking in holes, dark holes, noses and throats and ears.
Yeah.
And one particular situation comes to mind. I'm not sure how much we want to talk about this, but we will. Is that when we were just starting to bring people back into the office, I had a colleague call me and said, gee, I've got this guy, he's got an ear infection. And I tried this drop and that drop, what would you suggest? I said, well, you know what, let's bring him in and take a look. So long story short, he had a very bad cancer of his ear that I would have missed over the telephone. And so, that's part of my take on what we did in COVID.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we got him in time and did some good surgery, and he's fine now.
Yeah.
But it has changed things in many, many ways. We're kind of getting back to normal, but I don't think that the normal today in any walk of life, anything that we do, is really close to the normal that it was pre-COVID.
Yeah, I think we've all accepted the normal will look different, but it can still be really good, and it can still be like all those things that people wanted to do before, they can still do, even if they look a little differently.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of these hybrid work environments that we have are good because I feel like I'm going to be really interested years later to look back on the studies on this time and see, was being home all the time really that good for people? I know it's convenient,
right,
but is it good for society for people to be home that much?
I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think there are certain jobs that people were working from home pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And those are fine. But I think that in general, my take, and this is based on discussion with colleagues and observations, is that we need socialization, we need interaction.
Yeah.
They're now looking, I'm sure you're aware, they're looking at what happened in the schools.
Yeah.
And in Chicago, the kids, well, actually nationwide, are doing much worse on their standardized exams that were, based on education during COVID than they did pre-COVID. So that, I don't think that was a good situation in terms of where we're going in the workplace. Anybody's guess, but on a personal level, I would have a hard time working from home.
Yeah.
At least 100%, so that perhaps we'll end up with a hybrid.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I like being with my coworkers. I like being out, and I think one of the really interesting things for me, from the perspective of working in the legal industry, was access to justice, where people had more access to the courts than they typically would, at home. But I think there was also this revelation of how difficult it can also be to access the court systems and to navigate those, because it's not always as straightforward as like, I'm being sued, I know where to go get my information, I know how to talk to the clerk, the court, the judge, whomever, communicate with my attorneys and understand what they're communicating with the other side. All these things aren't quite as easy or as maybe as efficient as people would have maybe thought or understood pre-COVID.
Well, and one other aspect is that our interaction on a computer screen is different than that in person. So in the courtroom, I have spoken with lawyers, judges, who will say it's not the same. You pick up things when it's live in the courtroom that you don't pick up on Zoom. And I think that applies to a lot of areas. But again, there are areas where it's much more efficient. So I chair one of our committees for our academy for the ear, nose, and throat doctors. And every so often we'll have meetings, and these are people all over the country. So instead of people having to wait for something or to, everybody travel across the country, we turn our computers on.
Yeah.
And that's fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, definitely some positive things there. So I would assume COVID sort of was the birth of this idea to start SpaceShifts, and kind of looking around and seeing what was going on, you thought there's a way to utilize these spaces that's better than what we have, or at least something, because really there wasn't this concept before you came along, was there?
Wrong. Sorry. I actually thought of the concept before COVID. This is something that has been brewing in my mind for a long time, and something that I think COVID was a stimulus to get me going on it.
Okay.
But no, I had thought about it for a long time in terms of, just people having space that was not being utilized for one reason or another, and what if we brought these people together so they mutual benefit, so space could be utilized, so somebody who doesn't necessarily want to or doesn't have the means to start their own business in a space or whatever space need, couldn't do it, and now they can bring people together. So no, it's something that I actually thought then when COVID came along, yes, it said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's see what we can do.
So why don't you tell us what SpaceShifts is?
Good. Okay.
What's this concept?
All right. So SpaceShifts is a very simple concept that people don't get.
Okay.
It's interesting. Most people, even who go on our website where we try to explain things, and I think we explain things clearly once you understand it, think that SpaceShifts is a means of subletting. So that, again, I've got an office and I'm going to sublet part of that space. No. Subletting is a completely different concept.
Mm-hmm.
The concept with SpaceShifts is I have space, you need space. I'm not subletting my office. I am sharing part of my office with you, and you're going to benefit as well as I am. It doesn't have to be a law office. It doesn't have to be any office. It can be any space. It can be an automotive repair. It can be a hair salon. Anywhere people get together and utilize space. Doesn't have to be for business.
Yeah.
This is a platform that people can get together. So if a doctor is looking to have a space and doesn't want to open a full office, maybe they're slowing down and they just want to have an exam room, and another doctor is, gee, I've got this extra space. Hey, let's get together. Doesn't have to be like people either. So let's say the lawyer is in that situation. And again, we went from 10 spaces to 7 spaces. We got 3 offices now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could use some accounting help. And a young accountant thinks, well, I'd like to start my own practice. I don't want to go to work for this great big firm. But so there's an opportunity. You have common needs, i.e. an office space. You have common needs. I need to have assistance answering the phone. I need to have a computer system, fax, whatever. And so you've got that, and I've got that. Let's see if we can't get things together.
Yeah.
So that, gee, I'm an accountant and my client needs a lawyer. Could you help me? And vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could share business. You can, benefit from each other's businesses. So the potential is really unlimited. So it's not, I'm going to sublet my space.
Yeah.
It is, let's share, let's shift our space needs, space shifts, so that 2 or more people can benefit from this new situation.
What I liked about, so pairing that with the platform that I looked at, what seems to be really cool about this is it really puts the onus on the owner of the space to where they have a lot of control over their space. They know who's coming in. They know when they're going to be there. It's still very much their space.
Right.
They're sharing it with another person or a company. But they stay in control of this space so that they don't feel like they're handing that over to someone else who they don't know if they're going to care about their space the same way that they do. Very
good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So yes, it's not saying, okay, you've got this space. It's really not saying anything. The negotiations are individual negotiations in each situation. So that, maybe I want to just, here, we're going to put a wall here. These 3 spaces are yours.
Yeah.
But again, the onus is on the person that is sharing their space, and they can make a deal. They will know who they're having, and they will come up with terms that are mutually agreeable, mutually beneficial. So it really is offering a service that's not out there yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that entrepreneurship is just finding a gap and filling that gap with something that you have, right? And which is what you've done.
Right.
Is that something that came very naturally for you once you understood, okay, there's space here and people need it. How can I make that, connect these people who have it with people who need it?
That's a good question. It feels natural because it feels like an obvious need, an obvious situation that, gee, why didn't anybody else do that before? Being an entrepreneur, I'm not sure how I fit into that. Hopefully well.
Yeah.
We'll still see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty awesome that you're trying it and
Right.
and saying, and I think that we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small business owners who are like, if this doesn't work, I can at least say I tried it, because I have to feel like I tried this. Otherwise, you're just never going to know.
Right.
And I think that is something that's part of the entrepreneur spirit, is that if I don't try it and don't know, that's going to eat away at me.
Absolutely.
And I think that, hearing that in you is the same thing.
Sure. Absolutely. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has it been going? How has SpaceShifts been working?
Well, again, we are having some hurdles that we need to overcome.
Yeah.
The main hurdle is for people to understand the concept.
Yeah.
And for people to, really get involved and sign up. So at this point in time, we are not a booming business where we have to worry about hiring, marketing and CEO and everything else. But we are slowly but surely making progress.
Mm-hmm.
As you are aware, we are on a number of social medias. We are marketing, and we are seeing a somewhat rapidly growing interest in the concept. And we're hoping that in the future, events, podcasts like this will make it clearer to people, so they'll say, hey, you know what? I have nothing to lose. Yeah. Let's sign up.
Yeah.
And it will eventually, the platform will change, but right now it is a free for anybody, and again, anybody negotiates their terms. Nobody's going to tell you what to do, how to do it. It's I think just a wonderful opportunity to feel the waters and say, I have space, I need to fill it, let's see what comes in there. And I don't want to buy a whole office because I can do a lot of this from home, and let's see what's going on. I think that people will confuse us, as I said, with subletting, but they also will say, oh, well, this is another WeWork, where you go into a space and you have a secretary, et cetera. But no, not at all. There's
no membership or...
Nope. Like it's whatever terms the two parties or more agree upon. So you don't have to do anything other than what you agree upon.
Yeah.
So,
what is it about Chicago that you think could really, that this city would really embrace this concept and do well with this kind of concept? What do you know about this city that makes you feel it can be really successful here?
So Chicago is a hub for so many different types of businesses and industry. And as we all know, there is certainly I guess it wouldn't be exaggerating to say, a glut of office space and again, other space that is available. So that I think as we navigate the post-COVID waters, there's wonderful opportunity for lots of people. You don't, maybe again somebody wants to have a Chicago presence and they're living in some LA, whatever, and they want to come, but they don't want to start looking around, and having. So here's an opportunity. Well, let's try it in this space for a while. You can make your turn. Let's do this for a year. You can do this. Let's do this for a month to month. Yeah. And I think Chicago, as well as other cities, offers a huge opportunity in those areas.
Yeah, I think being a city that is very neighborhood focused means that when people come into those neighborhoods, hopefully now they're feeling very welcomed and they feel like they're part of something that's more than just, I think cities you can get lost in, right? Because they're big and there's lots to do and lots of people, and so you can feel lost in a city. But when you get to be a part of a neighborhood, I think it really changes things. And so getting to be in these neighborhoods. And I think even downtown, you get the vibrancy of the city, and that really, I think, kind of awakens your senses.
Oh,
almost.
absolutely. I mean, Chicago is, a city that is composed of many neighborhoods, and each one has their individual characteristics and charm and culture, but they all meld and blend in together.
Yeah.
And I think that as a city, we do well, and I think that that gives us more credibility, more opportunity as well.
Yeah, and as people want to try out this idea, this concept, and go to the platform and look at the spaces that are available and connect with the people who have these spaces, what do you hope to come out of that? Where do you hope this goes? Because obviously we want it to be successful, and we want it to grow and get to a point where you're like, I need more people.
Right.
But what more than that do you hope for?
So, I think most people, when they do these things, have grandiose hopes and ideas, which I do, but I also have a realistic attitude about things. But, my hope is that this is more than a Chicago-based, but a Chicago platform. It makes sense if this would work anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, so that hopefully people will solve problems on both sides of the equation. In that they can help each other, benefit mutually. And I think you brought up a very good point, Nathan, in terms of the neighborhoods. I think there's a tendency people look, well, he's trying to get people in those offices downtown that are vacant to share, and that's true. We are, but certainly not limited. Neighborhoods, there are small offices, many businesses that can share. If you have an automotive business and things are slowing down as the economy slows down, and you've got 6 bays and you're only using 3, well, golly gee, I'm a mechanic and I would like to have one of those bays. So it is something that applies across all geographic and cultural platforms, and so I'm hoping to bring people together and to their mutual benefit.
I think you make a great point there for someone who has had a dream to start some kind of business, whether it's a barber, mechanic, accountant, whatever they do. It's taking down one more barrier to that and providing resources that can be anywhere in the city and anyone has accessibility to. And so even taking down one more barrier, I think, is really making this city one where people can, have the dream and then fulfill that dream, or at least go after it. Right. Which it does good for the city, no matter where, if the space is here downtown, up in Albany Park, or down in, Inglewood or Hyde Park, or wherever you're going in the city, there's going to be space there.
That's correct. So, and then another point that comes to mind is we typically think, okay, I have the space, I'm going to charge X, and you pay X. But you could have a situation, you mentioned barber, which kind of rang the bell with me. So let's say that we have a space with 100 lawyers. Maybe I'm going to pay that barber to be on site. Because Joe's going to court today and he needs a trim. He doesn't have time to run to the barber shop. And if we have you available, let's keep you on retainer. Just one example, but so it could be to the situation where people would actually want to bring somebody in and pay them to have that extra, use the extra space.
Yeah, and then that barber could then take on extra clients to fill the time if they don't have enough clientele from the firm or wherever that other
and
space.
When those other people are coming into the law office, and they're, gee, that's a law office, and they do this and they do that. So again, it's so much more than subletting. It's just a wonderful opportunity for people to benefit mutually and to win upon each other's ideas and daily activities.
Yeah, it sounds really awesome. I hope that people start to get on there and use it, because I could really see that being super successful. So people can do that. Can you let us know where people can find you?
We are www.spaceshifts.com. So it's SPACESHIFTS.com, all one word. And we are there, and there is no obligation. We are hoping that people listening and viewing this podcast will go on, take a look, and if you have a space, list it. And if you're looking for a space, go right at that same website, and you might be very pleasantly surprised at what you come up with.
Yeah, I was. So I'm sure that our listeners will be as well. Dr. Siegel, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been really enlightening.
Thank you.
So thanks for sharing with us. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. Be sure to visit www.bridgingchicago.com to re-listen to this and any of our other podcasts, including all season 6. And make sure you also go to www.SpaceShifts.com. That's space, SHIFTS.com. And you can also visit them on Instagram and Twitter, where their handle is @SpaceShiftsChicago. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions, and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including, but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.